After appearing in the Super Bowl, it doesn't seem like public betting markets are very firm believers in the Cincinnati Bengals in 2022.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. Together, we're the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button or that follow button to get us delivered to your eyes and ears first thing every day with all the news and updates and analysis on your Cincinnati Bengals. And we're getting to draft season, James, but today thought it'd be a good opportunity to reflect on the odds journey for the Cincinnati Bengals. Way back on February 14th, the Bengals were 11-1 odds to win the Super Bowl next year in 2023. Today, on March 28th, as we record this episode, marks another week of decreasing odds for the Bengals to win the Super Bowl. Now 25-1 behind teams like the Las Vegas Raiders, the Baltimore Ravens, the Dallas Cowboys, the Denver Broncos, the Cleveland Browns, the San Francisco 49ers, and more. The list goes on. And this is just such a trend. And BetOnline, courteous enough to provide us with this trend. On the 14th of February, 11-1, the best the odds of for the Bengals, the best they've been. On March 7th, down to 16-1. On March 8th, one day later, 18-1. A week later, on March 14th, 22-1. And in the last 2 weeks, somehow a further decline to 25-1. So there you go. The betting markets, not believers, instead choosing to believe in the Super Bowl hangover.
All right, Jake, real quick, before I dive in, I got to put on my hot take chain because this has gone too far. And I need to make sure this bad boy is on. You see it if you're on YouTube. If not, it's okay, audio listeners, because now I'm about to go in.
Wait, do you just keep that at your desk?
Oh yeah, it's official. The hot take chain it's the official offseason prop of the Locked On Bengals podcast.
Incredible.
And so, okay, you said, and I started to take down the teams, but the Raiders, the Ravens, the Broncos, you named a bunch of teams that the Bengals either beat or swept last season. And this Bengals team hadn't even arrived yet. When they swept the Ravens, they hadn't officially arrived yet. And I know Baltimore had all these injuries. They beat the hell out of the Raiders in the playoff game. It looked much closer than it was. No one in Paul Brown Stadium that was wearing orange and black thought that the Bengals were going to lose that game. And that was on top of a 31-year playoff drought. Okay, so that's how confident people were during that game. I know I never thought that they were losing that game. I never wrote the story about Derek Carr leading the comeback against Joe Burrow and the Bengals. And, well, it didn't happen. My point is that there are light years difference. And yeah, okay, Devontae Adams is in, with the Vegas Raiders. Is Derek Carr better than Joe Burrow? Is Lamar Jackson better than Joe Burrow? Because people across the NFL think that dude, and I love Lamar, has kind of peaked and doesn't have that next gear. And so maybe the Ravens feel that way. They haven't extended Jamar yet. Russell Wilson, my man, you haven't ran in years. You can't throw over the middle. And I like you, but you're not going to get an MVP vote this year either. And meanwhile, Joe Burrow's thinking about winning MVP, and that's where his sights probably are right now. And obviously he's thinking about the team. But, I think Joe Burrow MVP, I think there's a very real possibility of this. So to me, you named all these teams, and I start with the quarterback. And this is why the take chain came on. There's a very real possibility that Joe Burrow is the best quarterback in the NFL in 2022. Not 5th, not 8th, not 22nd, not 12th, not the best in the AFC North. No. the best quarterback in the NFL. I don't care if you talk about Aaron Rodgers. Who's he throwing to right now? I might be able to audition for the Packers and get a practice squad role, maybe a Built Bar away. The point is Joe Burrow's ascending. He finally has a line that should be able to protect him, at least semi-protect him, which hasn't been the case since he was at LSU. That's going to unlock a lot of things. That's going to make Jamar Chase's life easier. Maybe T. Higgins hits another gear. Who knows? Maybe they actually do have 3 1,000-yard receivers in this drop-back passing offense where I think they're going to throw it all over the damn field. Wouldn't shock me at all if that's the case in 2022. So I don't want to make it just about quarterbacks because it's not. But in a lot of these games, it is. And that's why the Bengals beat the Raiders in the playoffs. Because when the game was on the line, they had the quarterback to get it done. The Titans, the quarterback and kicker to get it done. The Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes probably ahead of Burrow in most people's rankings. It's a very real scenario, though, that a year from now, we're talking about Joe Burrow being maybe the best quarterback in the NFL. And that's something I don't think the odds reflect. I don't think the national media is necessarily ready for it, but I bet a lot of our listeners are ready for it. And I don't think that that's me being a homer. I think there's a very real path if Burrow continues to ascend with these pieces around him, where he can be very much in the MVP conversation this coming season.
I think I buy that. And this goes back to our conversation in the mailbag last week at the end when we're talking about what makes a bigger difference in offensive line improvement. Is it going to help the run game more or the pass game more? And we talked about Joe Burrow's clean pocket passing numbers. And if he gets more of those opportunities, you should see statistical improvement for him for sure. At the top of the list is the Buffalo Bills, nearly 4-1, which is insane. Like they've gone from 15-2 to 7-1 to 15-2 to 27-4, which is nearly 4-1. Tampa, the second highest odds to win the Super Bowl, 33-4. Kansas City, 19-2. Green Bay, 10-1. Chargers, 12-1. Rams, 12-1. Those teams all have like twice as good or better odds than the Bengals. Looking at the AFC, Bengals tied with the Raiders for 7th best odds. Sorry, tied with the Ravens and Raiders for 6th best odds to win the AFC. So bettors are not buying the Bengals.
6th best. Like, that's crazy. They're the defending champs.
I think what's happened here, James, is that since this reflects bettors, right? This is Vegas trying to attract more money to bet on teams.
Sure.
That's what odds are, right?
Yep.
This is bettors reacting to the shiny moves.
Yeah.
I don't know what exactly Buffalo did that's caused the jump.
Von Miller.
Shiny. Yeah.
Shiny.
Very shiny. Kansas City, it's just Patrick Mahomes, right? And I think that's it, because you would expect Tyreek Hill's trade. And I think this is reflected. The Chiefs odds actually got worse after the Tyreek Hill trade.
Should have.
The Chargers made big acquisitions this offseason. Khalil Mack, certainly the headliner, and people really like Justin Herbert. Broncos acquiring Russell Wilson. The Browns acquiring Deshaun Watson, although who knows how much he'll play this year. These are the moves that are attracting the money, I think. And speaking of those moves, the AFC will be a bear this year. Mm-hmm. And I think that, we've kind of obliquely talked about it, and maybe it is as simple as Joe Burrow. Maybe it is as simple as these receivers and building the offensive line around him. And that's what's going to keep the Bengals in it and propel the Bengals forward. And that's certainly where it starts. But we can take a look around the AFC and where the Bengals fit into that picture coming up next.
But first, I got to tell you about BetOnline, because that's where all those odds are courtesy of. And that's your number one stop, your one-stop shop for all things sports wagering. Whether you want to bet on Joe Burrow winning MVP, certainly, you know my take on that. Or maybe you just want to get into this Final Four extravaganza. It's Duke, it's North Carolina. Oh, man, will a shorthanded Villanova get past Kansas? It's exciting. It's really exciting. Or will Coach K hold up one more trophy as he says goodbye and retires at the end of the year? BetOnline is the best spot for all of your sports wagering needs. It's not just college hoops. It's not just NFL. They got NBA, UFC, and so much more. Speaking of UFC, did you catch Joe Burrow over the weekend? He's a big fight fan. I bet he uses BetOnline as well. You should too. Check him out right now. BetOnline. Sign up for free. It's a one-stop shop, like I said. BetOnline, where the game starts.
James, Speaking of regular season MVP, looking ahead to next year, Joe Burrow actually has the 5th best odds at
So,
BetOnline for MVP right now, behind Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Tom Brady, ahead of Ron Rodgers and Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson and Matthew Stafford and Dak Prescott, etc. So pretty close to Tom Brady, actually. Tom Brady plus 900, Joe Burrow plus 1,000 for MVP in 2022.
and so that's the thing. To me, it goes like hand in hand. If Joe Burrow's playing like an MVP and winning the MVP, well, then the Bengals are the favorite in the AFC. So to me, it would coincide, and that's it. Like if he's MVP, we're talking about a 1 or a 2 seed for the Bengals next year. Like he's not going to win MVP if they're the 5th seed. It's just
right,
not how it's going to be. So, yeah, I mean, 5th, I think that's fine. I get having a Josh Allen ahead of him or a Brady. In part of it is the name recognition, of course, but Burrow top 5, that makes sense. But when we look at the Broncos being ahead of the Bengals, well, really? Like that's that, and so that to me is one of the teams. The Raiders being ahead or tied with the Bengals. That's insane to me. But that's where we are.
Yeah, and the Raiders, they did add pass rush. They did add wide receiver. They were a solid team last year, but they have a new head coach. I don't know. They have some ground to make up in my mind. And
And
they
they
have
don't have
Derek
the
Carr. Like,
yeah,
how
yeah.
good is Derek Carr?
Good. Not
Good.
great.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't seen great yet. We've seen good. Flashes of great, but not consistently great. And so anyway, when we look at the AFC West is undeniably going to be crazy. I think the
Mm-hmm.
AFC North has the makings of being pretty crazy too. The Pittsburgh
Yep.
Steelers aside, the Steelers are still somehow going to win like 9 games next year because Mike Tomlin somehow gets that team to 8 or 9 wins every year, even when there's no quarterback. Mitch Trubisky might be better than Ben Roethlisberger. He
He
probably
is.
is.
Yeah, he
And
is.
the defense is, well, we'll see how they hold up in terms of health. But Miles Jack comes in and they get TJ Watt and all these defensive linemen healthy. Stephon Tuitt hardly played last year. The defense probably gets them there. AFC East, how much do the Miami Dolphins moves get them into contention? Taron Armstead and Tyreek Hill with Tua Tagovailoa. Mike McDaniel with those fast running backs, Raheem Mostert coming down there and the offense he's bringing to Miami. Will they get into the mix with Buffalo at all? I don't know. I have a hard time giving Miami too much credit, but there's a couple teams in every division. I think Matt Ryan makes the Colts an agent of chaos. I've said this on Twitter a few times. The AFC South plays the AFC West this year.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Ryan could steal some games for the Colts against the AFC West and throw a wrench into things. They could even get into the playoffs and push the Titans. But when you look at the Bengals and how they fit in, it comes down to the quarterback. And Joe Burrow, to your point, James, should be better. Ben Baldwin had a really interesting tweet today, by the way, about pass protection projections, just purely using PFF pass blocking, charting, and grades and stuff, and looking at last year's grades and projecting them forward to this year. The Bengals offensive line would rank 12th. It ranks 12th in this methodology in pass blocking in terms of pressures and sacks allowed that he's projecting based on a very simple analysis, but
Mm-hmm.
points to a significant improvement from what, 30th,
30th.
31st
Yep.
to 12th. I mean, that would be huge. That's what we were hoping for last
If they do that, and assuming health, to the weapons and everything like that, like then Burrow will probably be favorite for MVP halfway through the year, maybe even sooner than that. Like, because he's going to put up numbers and he's going to win games. And so, well, how do you win MVP? You do those 2 things. And there were times last year where the numbers weren't there. They were still winning, but the numbers weren't necessarily there. Part of that, he was coming back from the knee. Part of that was because of the offensive line. And I expect all of these guys to take a step, including Zach Taylor, by the way. He's gotten better each and every year. And there were definitely some blemishes during that Super Bowl run, even in the Super Bowl. And I don't need to get into all of that. But now he doesn't have this thorn in the side of his playbook, at least on paper, that it was just like, probably can't call that play. Probably can't call that. What are we going to do? This is how we're going to scheme around it. And you can only do that so much. So, yeah, I think that part's exciting. But the AFC is insane. And that's where, like, at least on paper, maybe the Bengals are 10-7 again and they just get in. But on paper, there's going to be 7 teams in the AFC that all probably have a shot to win it all. Like, if they're healthy, like, you could easily see 7 teams that get in the dance, and if they get hot and things break their way, they can win it. And very rarely does a conference put out 7 teams where you're like, oh, all 7 of those teams can win it. For example, the Raiders. I don't think a lot of people would have said they could win it all. I never really thought the Titans were going to make a Super Bowl run, despite what maybe people in Tennessee would think. Probably a lot of people would say the same thing about the Bengals, and they did, and came within 90 seconds of winning the damn thing. But yeah, like, this conference, it's so talented that you could see all 7 teams having a shot, but 2 to 3 teams out of the North. The AFC East, it's weird now because the Dolphins seem to be going for it a bit. Are they, in the mix to make the playoffs? That would be a team where I'd be like, they're not a legitimate Super Bowl contender, if they made the playoffs. But I don't think they would if it started today. And I do think the Bengals would, and I think it would be tight because the Ravens, they're going to be healthier and are improved, and they're courting what's his name from Seattle, the linebacker. So
Bobby Wagner.
I knew you would remember it. So, maybe they get him, and I don't know how much better that makes them, but they're certainly trying to improve as well. So it's going to be fun. But the fun part about all of this is all these quarterbacks changed or these weapons. Guess what? The Bengals were ahead of it. They were ahead of it because they went and they got Burrow, and then they went and they got him weapons. And yeah, the offensive line did leave a lot to be desired. There's no denying that. But I'd rather take Jamar Chase 5th overall than give up 52 draft picks and pay Tyreek Hill, $25 million per year, because Jamar Chase today is probably as good of a receiver as Hill. Might be better than Hill in 2022. And, it's tough. Certainly produced like it, but, it's only 1 year, so I don't want to crown him yet. But, the Bengals, I think, got it right in the way they thought and attacked the past couple of years. And that's why they're not desperate for a weapon necessarily or desperate for a quarterback, because they have those boxes checked.
And I think you're seeing teams emulate them, connecting college wide receivers with college quarterbacks. Devontae Adams following that trend, getting back with his Fresno State quarterback. But you look at the teams the Bengals play this year, I don't think we can write off Lamar Jackson yet, because as Ravens fans love to point out, he is younger than Joe Burrow, and quarterback development isn't linear. So we might still see some development from Lamar. And I don't think you were writing him off. I'm not meaning to imply that, but for Bengals fans who might be thinking that, I think that might be a step too soon. But looking at the teams the Bengals play, they get the NFC South, which does feature the return of Tom Brady, and what should be a moderately capable Saints team, just because it's hard to imagine them being terrible. But you certainly like Joe Burrow versus Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill or whoever's playing quarterback at that point for the Saints. The Falcons are an absolute mess, featuring Auden Tate, by the way. We'll talk about Auden Tate here in just a minute. Farewell, Auden Tate. But you look at the teams that have made big investments this offseason that the Bengals play. It's Von Miller in Buffalo. That's going to be a tough game in Cincinnati. The Carolina Panthers, who I don't think are a team to really worry about because Sam Darnold, for now, at quarterback, did add a ton of players in free agency. They go play Miami comes to Cincinnati, goes to Cincinnati to play the Bengals with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Terron Armstead, and the many investments of the Dolphins have made into their offense, Mike Gesicki on the franchise tag. But they don't play many of these teams that have made these crazy moves. The only AFC West team they've played is Kansas City, who lost Tyreek Hill. So, there's no AFC West gauntlet on the schedule, and their NFC schedule, I think, is pretty light. And so obviously anything can happen. They might have to play Mike White in New York, and you never know when Mike White is involved, man. I tell you what, but
that's not funny.
The way that it works out is as you laugh, is it's hard to see this schedule as really being that brutal for the Bengals, despite it being a first place schedule and all that trash talk that you saw from other fans. But we'll get into that.
You need to put on a take chain. Look at Jake Liscow says the Bengals schedule is easy, 14-3. Like, I can already see it. I can see the headline.
Yeah, somebody. I know somebody who would write that headline. Auden Tate has made his way to the Atlanta Falcons. We will bid adieu to the fan favorite to finish the show coming up next.
The only thing more consistent than Locked On Bengals 5 times a week is, well, rockauto.com, your one-stop shop for all things car parts. They've been in business for more than 2 decades. And look, you want reliable transportation. There's nothing worse than holding your breath if you're trying to start your car or being stuck on the side of the road. And rockauto.com can keep you on the road for less. It's the same parts that you're going to get at the big box store, the same parts that you're going to get at the car dealership for less. Don't spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts you're going to get there at rockauto.com for cheaper. And the best part, you don't even got to put on shoes and get in your car to order any parts. No. You can keep those fuzzy slippers on from the comfort of your own home while you watch on YouTube or listen wherever you're getting your podcast, and go to rockauto.com. Pick out the car parts you're looking for your car or truck, and be sure to write Locked On in their "How did you hear about us" box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
At 6'5" and 228 pounds, the Bengals drafted Auden Tate in the 7th round, and he quickly became a fan favorite in Cincinnati. In 2019, in his age 22 season, as he was looked at as a potential late breakout, he was 21 as a rookie, just like Jamar Chase. He had 40 catches on 80 targets for 575 yards and a touchdown, 29 first downs, meaning 30 of his 40 catches went for either a first down or a touchdown. All really respectable stuff for Auden Tate, going for 47.9 yards per game in the Bengals last season with Andy Dalton. And then Joe Burrow got to town and T. Higgins got to town, and it seemed like Auden Tate's role diminished a little bit in 2020, just 14 catches on 22 targets, 150 yards. 9 of those for first down, still a pretty respectable first down productivity rate. But then in 2021, we saw a quick fall off in snaps for Auden Tate after his injury. He never got back on the field. And a lot of his role in terms of run blocking, in terms of being a possession receiver in those big moments, have been replaced by other players, whether in the receiving game by a multitude of receivers or in the running game by Stanley Morgan, who's freshly re-signed with the Bengals on a 2-year deal. Auden Tate has now become potentially the best receiver on his team, signing a 1-year deal with the Atlanta Falcons. And while he was never necessarily destined to be a starting productive wide receiver in Cincinnati, outside of 2019 anyway, when he had a respectable season, I always said, James, that Auden Tate had a very specific skill set that could be utilized in certain situations. And I think they did a lot of this in 2019, down year as it was. And the Bengals never really got there with Auden Tate for whatever reason. Maybe they just liked other guys better in that role. But good for him for getting an opportunity. And I know Bengals fans will miss him.
I will remember you. Will you remember me? Don't let you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to keep going. Jake was cringing there. We had rehearsal before the show, and let's be honest, it was not pretty. Sarah McLachlan was not excited about me singing that, especially in honor of a guy, Sarah. Who did I say? Sam? Either way.
No. I just said poor Sarah.
Oh, poor Sarah. Okay. Yeah. But look, you got to honor any guy who has 799 yards in 4 seasons. So no, I'm just kidding, man. It's the take chain. I got to take the take chain off. Sometimes you get too excited. It's true though.
Well, you don't have to be sarcastic about it.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair.
I mean, work on that chain. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. Chain's gone. All right. We'll bring it back on another episode. It's not going to be an episode every day thing, but no, Auden Tate was fine. And he certainly exceeded expectations as a 7th rounder and worked his way into a role that first year. And they had injuries with AJ Green out and, multiple receivers out in 2019, but he's limited. And I know fans love him. A lot of our listeners love him. And maybe he does get a chance in Atlanta. And that's all you can really ask for. Look, he spent You know how many 7th-round picks would love to have been on an NFL roster for 4 seasons? Auden Tate did that, and he's in position to make it a 5th. And who knows? Maybe he goes out, has another 40 catch, 50 catch season, maybe doubles that 799 yards and gets himself a decent contract. It's hard because even since he got into the league, it's the land of the freaks, the big, strong, fast, physical receivers. And there's a lot of them. And it seems like there's a lot of them every draft. And so it's tough when you're not the fast part. You're not super quick. And he's big and he's strong and he can make those contested catches. But there's other elements to his game that he doesn't have. And no, he's not going to be able to play tight end. You can't put on 30 pounds. I think that's pretty clear that that's not happening. And he views himself as a receiver, and I don't blame him. So I wish him nothing but the best. In Atlanta, you knew he was going to sign somewhere. And honestly, I can't think of a better destination from an opportunity standpoint than the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah. Calvin Ridley's is suspended. I don't really see anyone that's scary on that roster. Yeah, they're going to draft a receiver. Maybe they draft a quarterback. Who knows? But look, it's Marcus Mariota, and you're in a dome, Auden. So go show off and show out, and hopefully you get paid, my man.
There's some playmakers there. Kyle Pitts, obviously. Everybody knows that one. Cordero Patterson, back with Atlanta after his late career renaissance last year.
Play action to Auden Tate.
You think your chain enabled you to give some hot takes, James? I just didn't Google. I Twitter searched Auden Tate's name, and your hot takes have nothing on this. All right, here's the first one. At Sad Kuminga fan, don't know Jonathan Kuminga, don't know who that is. Auden Tate can be a top 24 wide receiver next year. There's one. 2.
Like from today? Like this is today.
This is today. 2 minutes
my
ago.
God.
Actually, as we record this. This is fun. At Bet on the Game, guy named Kyle says, as an FYI, Auden Tate is on every dynasty waiver wire. I'm putting down 15 to 20% of my free agent auction budget. He's 25 years old and in line for 100 targets. These are the takes. Man, you think your takes are hot. We got to step up.
700 but see, but my hot takes aren't ridiculous.
No, but okay, last one. Yeah. Scott Karasik, who I actually follow, and I think an old-time draft follow, is an Atlanta guy, says that dude is a great fit for Arthur Smith and could be an 800 to 1,000-yard guy in this offense. You buying it?
Well, I just said, 50 catches, maybe 799 yards, right? So, like, there's a chance, right? But that's and there's 17 games, and they're gonna have to throw to somebody, and maybe they pass on a quarterback this draft, and they use it as a bridge to go into next year's draft and get maybe a Bryce Love. Maybe they tank essentially. So there is a path for that, right? But is it an efficient, realistic path, or is it a numbers juiced path? Because the old NBA adage where someone's going to get 20, and if you're on a bad team, someone's going to score 20, right?
Yep.
So there's part of it there. And I know fans hate that. And I'm not trashing Tate. I also think he is what he is. So like on a good team, he's what he's been on the Bengals. Like maybe a little bit more where he's getting a little more run, and I mean, when he's healthy on the Bengals. Obviously he got dinged up last year. So, that's it. Because I think good teams in this day and age, you're going to be 2 to 3 deep at receiver.
Yeah.
Or you're rotating that third wide receiver spot, and no one's, and Tate to me is not a clear-cut wide receiver 3 week in, week out, play in, play out on a championship level team.
Yeah, I mean, if he gets 100 targets, you could see 800 yards. You could see a handful of touchdowns. Atlanta probably not going to be very
1,000.
It would mean that everybody who loves Auden Tate was right, and the Bengals misused him for all those years. And you know what, man? Go ahead. Last thought.
Kyle Pitts would go. I think Kyle Pitts having 2,000 yards next year is more likely than Auden Tate having 1,000.
That would be wild. Tight end going over 2,000 in his second year at his age. That'd be fun, man. Kyle Pitts is really good. Let's wrap up there. Wishing Auden Tate all the best. He has an opportunity. And I know Bengals fans love him, thought it would be appropriate to wax poetic. I saw a future for him at some point. The Bengals never really put him in the role that I imagined for him. And he hopefully will have those opportunities to continue his professional career down in the AFC South, where the Bengals will be visiting. sometime in 2022. Sorry, hosting. I've gotten that backwards twice. Hosting the Atlanta Falcons in 2022, and Auden Tate will be able to return to Cincinnati if he's healthy. He has always battled some health issues. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Tomorrow we're joined by PFF's Brad. Does all their contract analysis. Spielberger, sorry. Does all their contract analysis. Had spot on salary forecast for a lot of guys. We're going to reflect on the Bengals signings and get his opinion on the value the Bengals did or did not get in their free agency period. Until next time, Bengals fans, hoo day and have a good one.